There are lots of great things coming in .NET 6, and I'd like to try them now, but I don't necessarily want to install a preview SDK on my main work machine. Fortunately, there's a cool feature in Visual Studio Code that will allow me to play with these new bits without messing up my work computer. So let's mash on that.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the ASP.NET Monsters. Today's episode, we're going to take a little look at dev containers.
Yeah, so I'm hoping this will be a quick demo, assuming it all works this time around. But I'm just going to
Wait,
create
what
it.
do you mean this time around?
I tried recording this, or we tried recording this a week ago, and it just wasn't cooperating. So I think it'll work this time, though. I did try it again, and it was all good. Okay, so I just have an empty folder here that I've created, and I'm just going to launch Visual Studio Code. And we'll take a look at what's happening here. So there are some extensions that I have installed to enable this, and those are called remote containers, remote SSH, and remote WSL. There's kind of a handful of them, and it's a lot to remember, but not to worry, there is actually a extension pack for this, which I will link to in the show notes. But it's just the remote development pack. You install this one extension, it will install everything you need. The only other thing you need on your machine is Docker for Windows, in my case, because I'm on Windows. But Docker, so I have Docker installed and running here on my machine. And that should be all I need. So now to enable this feature, what I need to do is just create a new folder in here in my workspace, which is called .dev container. So .dev container, a folder there, and then a file called dev container.json, which is going to contain the settings for this development container that I'm creating. And in this case, I actually only need to do one thing, and that's specify the image that I'm going to use. So what I'm going to do is pull in the .NET 6 Preview 7 SDK here. There's an image that Microsoft publishes for that, and hit save. Once I've done that, that should be everything we need to tell Visual Studio Code here to open this up in the dev container. So I just need to click the little remote viewer, or the remote tool button or whatever it is here in the footer, and scroll down to reopen in container. So that's going to close Visual Studio Code, reopen it for me. And now what it's doing is it's spinning up a Docker container in the background that's going to be based on that image that we specified, which should have .NET 6 installed. So now all of my terminal, and when I compile and run the app, that's all going to be happening inside the dev container. But Visual Studio Code is running on my machine here. So it still gives me the same experience that I would get when I'm developing locally, but the code actually and compilation, all the tools live inside of this dev container. So you'll see that there's a terminal open here, and even though I'm on Windows, it looks like a Linuxy type of terminal. And if I do .NET -- version here, I should get the .NET 6 preview. Whereas on my local machine, if I do .NET, I don't even know what version I have installed here, .NET 5, some version of .NET 5. So I have .NET 6 available. I should be able to create a new app here, or a new project, and just give it a try. So we'll do .NET new console, I guess. We'll just create a simple console app. And there it goes. It created the CS proj and a program.cs that looks very different than what we're used to for those of us who've been working in .NET for a long time. There's no namespaces. There's no program main, static main method. It's just the code that we're running, and I can run that code. .NET 6. .NET run, I mean. To run that should give me my little hello world. And we've got language mode C# installed. I wonder if I get my C# tooling in here like I would expect to. It hasn't prompted me. Often it will kind of like
Just to
notify you
let you know it's
saying,
missing,
hey,
something for
it
that
looks like you're
project.
doing .NET. Maybe you should install the C# tooling. And I know it did that for me in the past, but we can always just say, here's my C# extension, I can install that in my dev container. I recognize that I have it installed locally, but that it's not installed inside that container, so I'm installing it now. Then I should start to get the IntelliSense and everything that I would expect for this .NET 6 project that I'm running. And the way I'm going to test that is to test, okay, add some assets, sure, why not? I'm going to see if I get some of the new types that I'm hoping to play around with, which we'll do in another episode. And there we go. So we have this new date only type, which is a date without a time. And I should be able to create one of those. And I'll just do a console write line. Here's my lovely IntelliSense date. Just see if that runs. There we go. Lots of fun .NET 6 features to play around with, which we'll do in future episodes, but this is a kind of cool way to play with preview things without, messing up that nice local setup that you already have that you need for your day-to-day work.
This is all great, Dave, but how much does it cost?
Well, nothing.
I know, that's crazy. Wouldn't you like to take this in a time machine back to 1999 and just be like, watch what I can do? How about even 2009? That would probably even be impressive enough.
You could always do C# with just Notepad and the compiler, and that was always free.
So is it creating a share then back from the directory that you've got the dev container in? How is it putting these assets and running them in that in the container? Is it doing a shared folder or something?
Yeah, it's mounting the file system inside of the dev container. So if you open up that .dev container and you take a look at that JSON file, so one of the additional things that you can add in here, there's a bunch of stuff that you can add in here, is extensions, or your mounts too. But I was going to say extensions, so that bit where you installed the C# tooling, you can put that in here. And it'll install that by default when the container starts. So this is a really nice way, yes, to play around with stuff on your local machine, but if you have a team that is working on something and you want to make sure that everybody has the same environment, then you can set them up with a dev container and install all the expected extensions and everything inside of the dev container. And there's no reason that you have to use the .NET dev container. If you needed to, or .NET image, if you needed to build your own image that had a bunch of tooling installed on it, so we've got an image processing library or compression library that you're calling out to, you can build an image based on this. You can use this as the root image and then apply some additional layers so that your team can use those.
I'm on a project right now where we've got developers who prefer a Unix style shell. We have 2 Mac heads and a couple of PC users, and this feels like 60% at least of the configuration woes we had with, especially related to database configuration, connection strings and stuff like that, that would probably go away pretty easily with the right container and setup here too.
Yeah. We used it at work for a project that we were doing that was Java, and most of the team was on Mac, and they just had everything installed locally, and that was the only project they worked on, so that worked fine for them. But for the rest of us who were working on the project, we also worked on a lot of other things, and we needed for that project just the very specific versions of the Java SDKs. And so what we did is we set up a dev container that configured things just exactly the way it needed to be for that project, and then we were able to work on it that way without having to install anything locally on our dev machines to work on that Java project.
Mm-hmm. And there's all sorts of other cool stuff you can do. You can forward the ports from that container back to your machine. So if you want to just browse a website using your local browser, you can do that. And I think you can build this stuff out of a Docker file too. And you can even use Docker Compose in here. So if you have a multi-container solution that has a database container and an app container and a Redis container or something like that, then you can build that out and stand up 3 or 4 containers or however many containers you need.
Yeah, lots of great options. I'll link to it in the show notes, as I said, so that you can kind of dig into the documentation and see what's possible with it.
Yeah, a lot of fun. I'm a huge fan of this stuff.
Yeah, this looks like there's some really they're finding some really useful applications for some of the things that have kind of been like I can't help but feel like some of this isn't based on some of the foundations they've built with even remote code stuff with shoot, what is it called, live share
LiveShare,
and
yeah.
whatnot. Yeah, and just but yeah, this is great, wonderful.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot for sharing that, Dave. And for everybody who joined us today, remember to like, comment, and share. And we'll see you all on next week's episode.
Thanks everyone. Cheers.